Did your last vacation house for the whole crew leave you wishing there was a better way to stay together? Like with bedrooms that are all great, so everyone thinks they got the best room?
Whoa! This is amazing.
A full bathroom in every bedroom?
Hey, mine's got a bathroom.
A beach around an epic, clear bay big enough for swimming, rope swinging, and even kayaking? All next door to Walt Disney World? Next trip, share a house at Evermore Orlando Resort. You won't believe what you resorted to before.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
This week, the Prime Minister and Premiers gathered in Saskatoon for a First Ministers meeting that you could describe as a love-in.
I'm going to be very blunt here. This has been the best meeting we've had in 10 years.
I'm encouraged by the immediate change of tone.
Ontario's Doug Ford and Alberta's Danielle Smith among the premiers, leaving the meeting with optimism after the 14 leaders sat down to discuss the federal plan to try and fast-track nation-building projects by slimming down their approval process to a maximum of 2 years. It still requires legislation, but it is part of the effort to create a surge of economic activity to better protect the country from the uncertainties of President Donald Trump's trade war and to end our reliance on our American ally. The Prime Minister did not settle on any official project list, as some were expecting, but he did give premiers the criteria for what would get the green light.
Provide undeniable benefits to Canada, have a high likelihood of successful execution, be a high priority for Indigenous leaders, and to drive Canada's clean growth potential.
While there are many possible projects that fit this mold, Alberta's push for a new pipeline to bring oil to Tidewater took most of the attention, since the Prime Minister's open to the idea as long as the industry invests in carbon capture and storage to so-called decarbonize the bitumen. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and today on The Big Story, I'm speaking with former Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeel to discuss how the meeting went, whether Alberta's pipeline dream can become a reality, and what challenges lay ahead for implementing this ambitious plan. So, Stephen, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. Happy to help.
Let's start with the quote from Premier Ford that took a lot of the headlines. He claims this is the best First Ministers meeting in the last 10 years, which is quite the claim. I know you weren't in the room for this meeting, but you were in the room for previous ones over the last 10 years. Given all the smiles and unity you saw exiting, do you think Ford's assessment is fair?
Well, obviously, I wasn't in the room, and I'm not one to question whether Premier Ford's language was accurate or not. But I've always felt, to be frank, that when First Ministers met with the federal government, there was a focus on Canada. There were always some challenges. Obviously, this one, we're in a very different dynamic with what's happening with the United States and our need to diversify our trade. So the fact that this one was really focused on the economy and the diversity of our economy was a good thing.
Okay, so as I mentioned, you were premier for a while, for more than 7 years, actually. So you saw your fair share of these meetings. Take us into the room. What's it like when premiers sit down? Is it kind of tense? Is it easygoing, given that a lot of work may have been done ahead of time? Is there yelling, screaming? How does it work? And how difficult is it to get the consensus that we saw?
So when I was first elected, the federal government did meet with premiers collectively. There were bilats where the prime minister of the day would meet with premiers individually, but there was never the first ministers' meetings with the federal government started under Prime Minister Trudeau. There was a lot of work that had happened leading into meetings, as I'm sure there was yesterday, as well as we know there was yesterday. So a lot of issues are dealt with in advance. Each province comes to be able to articulate their own issues, but it's not yelling and screaming at each other. people get to lay out where they stand. And oftentimes there's compromise where people can find common ground, maybe not get everything they were looking for, but get enough to be able to provide something for their own province as well as supporting other provinces in the country.
Given all of the talk leading into it, were you kind of surprised that even Alberta's Danielle Smith said at the end of all of it she was encouraged by the talks that they had?
Well, no, I think the Prime Minister has sent a very strong signal from, since he's been the leader of the Liberal Party and Prime Minister of Canada and going into the federal election, that he understood the frustration of Western Canada. The fact that they felt the resources that were dominant out there in oil and gas weren't being respected or treated the way that they felt they should. And quite frankly, the way that they have driven the Canadian economy was not understood at the national level. And I think Prime Minister Carney has demonstrated that he's understood that. He's willing to find a solution to broaden the customer base of those resources. So I wasn't surprised at all. And I know that they would have had to have done some work coming into this meeting. And Premier Smith's tone going into that meeting had begun to shift, really within the last number of weeks.
Now, there was an expectation that this meeting would result in a list of projects that would be getting this fast-tracked approval that the feds have promised, but instead we just kind of got criteria and an agreement to keep working to make sure those projects hit those marks. Is it a surprise that we didn't get a list?
Well, I think Premier Ford, in his closing comment, said that there was no one was under the illusion in the room that they were going to be picking projects yesterday. What the meeting really was about, to lay out the criteria as you described about what would fit in the nation building project bucket type of thing. Whether it was critical minerals, whether it is promoting an energy grid, broadening our ability to share not only oil and gas across this country, but hydroelectricity, and making sure those critical minerals that will be required and that are in the ground in Canada can get out in a timely fashion. So I think the framework that was set out yesterday and settled on yesterday will then begin. I think you'll start seeing projects being talked about very quickly.
The Prime Minister indicated that possibly by the summer we'll get more of an official list, but called it a living document, if you will. So things will be added and taken away as necessary as this moves forward. One of the biggest projects that was talked about, possibly because there's more confrontation or contention around it, is Alberta's push for new pipelines to get bitumen from the oil sands to Tidewater. More specifically, the pitch seems to be to a port in Prince Rupert, BC, as well as possibly to Churchill in Manitoba on Hudson Bay, and that would open up more access to Asia and European markets. Do you think that that's a reality? Do you think that can actually happen? Because we've had so many years of discussions about new pipelines, and it was the government that had to go in and save one recently. So can we see that become a reality?
It's a must. We for too long have had one customer in the energy sector, which has been the United States. I can tell you that if the pipeline that was currently built by the federal government to the west coast of our country, if that had not been built, we would be in a very different circumstances today. We would be relying 100% on the U.S. to buy all of our oil and gas. That pipeline that goes across the country means 40% of that oil or natural gas is being shipped out is going into the Asia market. That is the diversification of our oil and gas sector that will be required to be able to allow us to weather the storm of whatever's going to happen in the United States. It also allows us to get the maximum value out of that product. If you only have one customer, I don't care what the product is, they set the price. It was true in Atlantic Canada when it came to seafood. That's why I spent so much time in Asia as Premier. They became our second largest trading partner. The United States was always our largest trading partner, and they still were at the end, but they no longer set the price for the product. That's why when the Prime Minister talks about diversifying our customer base, diversifying our economy. That's what he's referring to. Begin to take control of our own destiny in terms of setting price for the products that we have and maximizing the value of those products. Pipelines are one of those ways. I'm encouraged by the fact that we are talking about Churchill. That's a new destination. You're hearing the Premier of Quebec now warm to the idea of a pipeline. That's a positive sign for the east coast of Canada. For a number of years in Atlantic Canada, we were talking about generating the Atlantic Loop, which was connecting the Atlantic provinces with Quebec to be able to move hydroelectricity throughout the region. They're now talking about it as an energy corridor. You know, I'm pleased to see that people who were opposed to that before are now promoting it. Those are the kinds of projects we need to do to maximize the value of the resources that we own, share them with other Canadian provinces, at the same time be able to export them into a broader market so that we can then take that resource back here in Canada and help build an economy and, quite frankly, keep the standard of living that we as Canadians want.
But we don't actually have a private sector proposal yet. I know some premiers have said, you know, we've got shovel-ready projects that have gone through a lot of checks and balances that could really fit the bill for this. But on the pipeline, there's no private sector proposal on the table here. How does that impact it? Is it sort of a field of dreams situation? If you build it, they will come? Or like, should we be starting this as a federal side? How does that work?
Well, there's a number of ways for it to happen. But I think the very first thing is the private sector is going to need some certainty. They're going to need certainty from provinces and the federal government that these projects will actually be allowed to be built. That's where we're at. The reason that you don't see a project, quite frankly, is because Canada wasn't encouraging people to build a pipeline. That tone has changed. I think the private sector will come. Federal government may need to be part of a project, but I think the most important thing today and over the last number of days is that the Prime Minister has set a clear tone to private sector that we will be moving forward and permitting projects in a much more timely way, and we welcome private sector investment. I found it interesting that leading into this meeting, he met with large oil and gas companies in Calgary, heading into our meeting with them. Very positive signs came out of that meeting. I think they're well on their way to setting the signal to the private sector. Your money's welcomed in Canada. Your projects are welcomed in Canada, and we will help fast track those projects. And I think you'll see people step up.
On the pipeline, could BC be that roadblock? The BC government doesn't seem too hot on this idea at the moment to have another pipeline hit the coast. You know, the so-called term decarbonized oil, which is really talking more about carbon capture and storage. But is that potentially that compromise that could help get that deal done for BC?
Well, that may be part of that. There's obviously a pipeline we would welcome coming east. There's also, as we just described in an earlier comment, a pipeline to Churchill, where that can be moved out and brought into Eastern Canada and broader Europe. So it's not one pipeline. There will be always challenges with any project. That's what the Prime Minister's talking about by putting that 2-year window of being able to permit these projects. That's what the certainty that people are looking for, that the permitting process won't last for 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 years. People need to have a level of certainty that we'll start the process and go along and meet the requirements of the communities and the provinces in the country. But we need an answer faster than 4 and 5 and 6 years. And I think these are positive things. So it's not as one project or another. There's multiple pipelines that could actually meet that standard. And the private sector will choose which one allows them to get return on their investment and allows them to get the tidewater to be able to get to the market for a diversified customer base.
More on the big story with former Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil in just a moment.
Did your last vacation house for the whole crew leave you wishing there was a better way to stay together? Like with bedrooms that are all great, so everyone thinks they got the best room?
Whoa, this is amazing.
A full bathroom in every bedroom?
Hey, mine's got a bathroom.
A beach around an epic, clear bay big enough for swimming, rope swinging, and even kayaking? All next door to Walt Disney World? Next trip, share a house at Evermore Orlando Resort. You won't believe what you resorted to before.
Now, the feds are looking to put forward legislation to make sure that these approvals take place 2 years or less, which is quite fast considering some of these things could take years upon years to approve. But there's no commitment yet from the feds for federal funding to push these projects through. Is that something that will come later in the process, or is it that they really want to make sure that there is private sector involvement generating a lot of these major projects?
Well, each project will be different. But I didn't hear from the Prime Minister or from anyone that, these projects would be built by the federal government. What they're doing is clearing the roadblocks to allow for private sector investment. Many of these projects, whether it is the Ring of Fire in Ontario, will be private sector money. What they need is certainty around the process. And sending a clear signal of 2 years, to me, is a very, very positive step. The other thing that we've heard is that, there will be one process. There won't be a federal and provincial process, which was happening, laying over top of each project. They're going to do one process, one permitting process, and clear the way. If there's certain investments that the federal government and provincial governments believe are in the nation's best interest that they want to participate in, they'll do those as individual projects. But make no mistake about it, if the permitting process happens, private sector money will come to help deliver these products to market.
Was it a mistake not to have Indigenous leaders at the table for this discussion? I know there were talks the night before, more informally. How might that Indigenous relationship prove to change the process moving forward?
Well, I think no one, I heard the Prime Minister, I heard Premier Ford as well say they fully understand and know they have a duty to consult. That process will happen. What you saw was a group of First Ministers meeting, elected to lead their respective provinces or the country to set a process. That's not the final end of it. They know there will be that duty to consult with First Nations who are part of the ongoing permitting process. So I think that will look after itself as projects start to move forward. Because bear in mind, each Indigenous community which is impacted by these projects may view it differently than another one. So what you need to know is what projects are going to happen, where they're going to happen, and which communities are being impacted by them. And those communities will be consulted because the federal government by law and the provinces by law have a duty to consult.
You don't think it would have been better to have them at the table at the start of this process so that it could help dictate how they approach these projects moving forward?
Well, they don't have any projects at this point. What yesterday was setting the parameters of between the federal and provincial governments around the regulatory environment. What does that process look like? As you know, he talked about clean energy projects. He talked about, he mentioned pipelines. Now, where would those go? You mentioned one in British Columbia. That's one of a number of projects that are being talked about. That would impact different communities. So those communities need to be dealt with directly. They need to be consulted directly, not consulted on a national basis. It would be those communities that are impacted. For example, in Nova Scotia, it would be the Mi'kmaq Nation that would be consulted. And it wouldn't be the federal, the national organization speaking for the Mi'kmaq Nation. It would be the chiefs of Nova Scotia who would be speaking on behalf of their communities. That's the issue, and that's the process around how you permit these projects. And I'm, I think we all should be very clear. The Prime Minister and Premier Ford, who leads the Premier's table, both acknowledged yesterday and recognized and reaffirmed they have a duty to consult as they move forward.
What are the main challenges moving forward to get these things built and get this process through? And how difficult will it be for the Prime Minister to make decisions on what makes the cut? And will there be tensions if certain projects don't get the approval that some premiers were hoping for?
Well, there may be. I mean, I wasn't at the table, but when you look at the parameters that are laid out, for example, a clean energy corridor, that as I mentioned earlier, is the Atlantic Loop, which we'd been talked about with the previous government. They were willing to invest at the time. So, I mean, a lot of these projects are well on their way. That would connect, that would connect Atlantic Canada, quite frankly, with Quebec. That's a positive project. Is it exactly what everyone wants? Probably not. But there's a piece of that they could all use, help drive stable energy pricing, create investment to create clean, green energy that can be shared with inside of Canada and exported outside. So if you look at some of the other buckets that the Prime Minister was talking about, there's clearly places in there for every province. Critical minerals being one of them. Every province would share in that process. So whether it's exactly their wish list, I think the job they did yesterday and the buckets that were laid out, each province would be able to identify something in there that they could bring back to their respective provinces as a positive thing.
All right, the criteria laid out. Now it's up to the premiers to make sure the projects they have fit those criteria. I appreciate it, Premier McNeil. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time. Former Premier McNeil, sorry.
Thanks so much. Take care now.
I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and that was The Big Story. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.
Did your last vacation house for the whole crew leave you wishing there was a better way to stay together? Like with bedrooms that are all great, so everyone thinks they got the best room?
Whoa! This is amazing.
A full bathroom in every bedroom?
Hey, mine's got a bathroom.
A beach around an epic, clear bay big enough for swimming, rope swinging, and even kayaking? All next door to Walt Disney World? Next trip, share a house at Evermore Orlando Resort. You won't believe what you resorted to before.